We are recording. So yes, the entertainment industry has done a number on demons. And if you think about The Witch, I would say, if anything, Robert Eggers introduced a new perspective, which Ari Aster was able to ride along on in Hereditary. And I know for a fact, because I also work in the entertainment industry, that Ari Aster employed demonolators to help him in the creation of Hereditary, featuring King Paimon. Obviously, that movie is incredibly, what's the right word here? Exaggerated in how to work with demons or how they work with their practitioners. But modern stereotypes with Abrahamic influence give us gooey, fleshy creatures with black or red eyes, sharp goat-like horns, rows of teeth, and an insatiable hunger for human souls. Ooh. But these pits of hell sort of stereotypes, they did not begin with a poet's journey into hell, guided by the poet Virgil, featuring Dante as he descended through the 9 circles, eventually arriving at the center face to face with Satan. This comedic poem is to blame for some modern day interpretations of hell, but where did it all actually begin? Does anyone want to take a crack at that? You don't have to, because contrary to the belief that demons are rooted only in the Abrahamic pantheon, they actually have been infiltrating mythos across the globe for thousands of years. It is true that they are found all throughout the New Testament. They are referenced as evil spirits that play an adversarial role to Jesus as he walks around casting them out of people in Galilee. But in order to truly understand demons, we have to look beyond Christianity. When Christianity was developed in the late Greco-Roman period, demons were acquainted with pagan gods. That's just what happened. They were equated with Hellenic gods, Egyptian gods. The list continues, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole because it is a deep one. But the word demon itself comes from the Greek word daemon. I mean, at this time, even the great god of Olympus, Zeus, was considered a daemon. But predating the Christian takeover of Rome, the Romans and Greeks believed that demons, or daemons, were powerful entities with the ability to control life as we know it here on Earth. They had command over the weather, the arts, sciences, astrology, and divination. They were divine spirits existing between this world and other dimensions, making them closer to mortals than gods themselves, which, if anyone here does work with demons, it's interesting how quickly you get a response from working with the demon than from working with Sky Daddy or any other. We'll just talk about Sky Daddy for a second. Leave that alone. But the Greek name daemon was referring to an incredibly vast range of beings, including the dead. But Plato referred to them as intermediary beings. And this validated that they had powers here on Earth for many scholars in Greece and Rome during this time. Having philosophers of that caliber refer to them as these intermediary energies that were available to us to work with really drove a lot of their essays at that time. But how the hell, no pun intended,
sorry,
that's what the button does,
did we get to where we are now, which is the battle between good and evil? So, according to Greek and Roman philosophers such as Plato and Homer, as well as Greek and Egyptian papyri, they were convinced that these beings were of a neutral energy, that They were energetically and morally ambiguous. And they could be helpful and also commanded by humans, which is seen much later in Solomonic practices that feature ceremonial rituals involving demons and working with them. But let's crawl before we walk for a second. We will get to that. So let's go back. So back in the beginning of Christianity and the employment of the word fear.
I'm so sorry.
This was heavily influenced by Jewish apocryphal texts, such as the 7 Dead Sea Scrolls, the Apocalypse of Abraham, the Ascension of Isaiah, all featuring a demon named Belial or Belial. And you also have the books of Enoch. And this features the Watchers. And this offers us the concept of the fallen angel. And this text introduces us to Azazel or Azazel and many other fallen angels like Samyaza. And their half-human angel children, the Nephilim. But we enter a tale as old as time with these apocryphal texts, which is angels good, demons bad. And what's wonderful about these Enochian texts is it also brought us to Enochian magic. And it leads us to these magical practices within the occult. And although these two entities are different, angels and demons, they actually have a lot in common. And in Genesis, angels are conflated with demons. But most Christian texts, they like to avoid apocryphal texts just kind of across the board, which is fun. But it's important to remember that polytheism and polytheistic faiths of Mesopotamia, Assyrian, and Persian gods were previously lumped into a category of adversary. Because once the god El, or Elohim, became the center of a monotheistic faith called Judaism, we had an introduction to an adversary for the second time. We'll get into that in a minute. See, this shift right here, this was ultimately the driving force behind the apocryphal text to begin with. This shift is what created those apocryphal texts. But Judaism, like I just said, it was not the first religion to introduce this concept. It was actually Zoroastrianism. That religion gave us a glimpse into the future of religion as we know now. See, it was the birth of monotheism. But I'm going to argue that later, so bear with me. But for most people, Zoroastrianism was the birth of monotheism as we know it. Zoroastrianism was started by a prophet named Zoroaster. And it was started in ancient Persia, which is what we know as Iran now, in roughly the 6th and 7th century BCE. And the god of Zoroastrianism was named Ahura Mazda, meaning wise lord. And he was the bringer of both light and darkness. And the light version of this god was a more evolved version of the dark version of this god, which was called Angra Manu. And that was the evil version. And I'm sure all of this sounds very familiar because it is very close to the Abrahamic pantheon. See, scholars like to argue if this religion, Zoroastrianism, is actually monotheistic. Some believe that it's dualistic. And that same argument can be made today within Christianity. And I think it's a great one. And I think it's one that we should kind of refuse to come to conclusion on and keep exploring. Because then it makes Christianity a little less dangerous, in my opinion. But back to morality, because this is a really important topic when it comes to demons. The confusion on where demons stand in morality, because morality is a social construct to begin with, so it remains a complicated question. And though It is true that demons did not originate within Christianity. We do have Christianity to thank for the polarizing and stark effect on the word itself, demon. Words matter, and they know it. Because as Christianity dominated Europe and claimed land, people, and control, along came the obsession with the devil and how we could keep ourselves safe from the devil. And this led to famous exorcisms, like the exorcism of Loudun in France, featuring multiple nuns and an experience with SA and a priest that was blamed upon demons. It also the fight against demons was involved in famous witch trials. We see it in Japanese folklore, as they have the yoki and the oni. In Hinduism, you have the devas. And Christians have Satan, or Lucifer, or Beelzebub, or Abaddon, or Mammoth, or you just kind of pick a name, and Christianity has just sort of lumped all of these entities into a singular entity. And it's interesting because it all comes from a great misunderstanding with the word Lucifer. This word lies within one and only one mention. He is featured in Isaiah 14:12. It is an all-encompassing mistranslation from the Hebrew term Hallel ben Shachar, which means the son of dawn. When that was translated into Latin, you get Lucifer. Meanwhile, Isaiah was talking about the king of Babylon and the demise of his reign. And he was saying, you will fall like the star in the sky. He was never talking about a fallen angel. If anything, he was actually referencing a hymn. It was a hymn that was from Mesopotamia. It was created for the goddess Inanna and how she would go to the underworld. So if Lucifer is a mistranslation and not an entity, according to Christianity, and Satan and all of the names in which I just said are not one, what are they? and how are all of these demons different? And what the hell is demonolatry? And how does one work with demons, and who are they? These are really great questions. They really are. And I have answers, somewhat. I want to first talk about grimoires and how working with demons was introduced. A grimoire, and if you already know this, you can just think in your head, fuck off, Abella, but it's just a French term for grammar book. That's it. Nothing crazy. But in the mid-17th century, there were grimoires compiled, and they were called the Lesser and Greater Keys of Solomon, also known as the Lemegeddon. And this book, this introduced demonology to the Christian world. It is really, and is a, on top of that, it is a anonymously authored grimoire. In its original state. But it is several centuries old by the time it was introduced to Christianity, which is fascinating. But this was the practice of calling upon demons to do your bidding, as Solomon did, while using opposing angels and names of God to protect yourself. And it is really important to mention that Solomonic books and magic are not actually considered demonolatry. I just want to point that out. Demonolatry is the practice of working with, yes, similar, but worshiping demons. And so many demonolators would argue me on that because they say, well, I don't worship, and that's totally fine. It still counts as demonolatry. Whether you worship or you don't, it doesn't matter. If you are working with them in this fashion, it is considered demonolatry. Also, you will hear people, occultists who practice this way, consider this the left-hand path. And so you'll hear it referenced a couple different ways. But what makes a demonolator? because if it is the practice of worshiping and working with the infernal divine, you will hear that. Sorry. Jacob's not here. If you hear this term, the infernal divine, it's just another way of saying demons. But most infernals or demons that are worked with in modern day are from the Ars Goetia. Though I have to say this, not limited to the Ars Goetia. That is simply one book and one reference of demons. And the word Goetia is rooted in the Greek word for sorcery, and I won't pronounce it because I will butcher it. But the Ars Goetia itself is actually a compilation of other demonic descriptive grimoires, such as the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon that I just talked about, although Aleister Crowley, raise of hand of anyone who's heard that name before, thank goodness, in 1903 was heavily influenced by Johann Weir. And he was a Dutch occultist and physician who wrote and then who influenced Aleister Crowley's writing and translation of the Ars Goetia, where he also changed the sigils. So I have news for you. You'll hear this across the board with demonolators, that we don't like to work with sigils that have seals around it, which is a circle.
I've heard that, yeah.
But I have fun facts. Aleister Crowley created those seals for aesthetic purposes. They do not actually hold and or bind anything. What does is the opposing names that are used within a Solomonic practice. So I just like to dispel that because it's kind of a very large misunderstanding. Anyway, so demonolatry became, demonology, it became a wide practice within the early 1900s. And this is actually, it's not just thanks to the recollection of these ancient texts, but the movement towards psychology, towards physics, and frankly, the obsession with psychological research on consciousness. And this is when science and religion literally shaped demonolatry and demonology, and frankly, how occultists would practice forever, moving forward. See, Aleister Crowley would argue that the 72 spirits were facets of the human brain. And what really matters is that by you following a set of practices, you'll actually see real changes in your lives. That these demons, they embodied our physical realm. And we could change our world, the world around us, just by working with them, according to him. And ultimately validating the movement of understanding psychology and science and physics and consciousness. But a lot of people disagree, although they are still demonolators. If you work with the Goetia as a whole or as a facet, you are still a demonolator. But a lot of people work with them on an individual level, me included. That does not mean that I don't acknowledge them as a whole energy. But most names and descriptions of these demons are intertwined with other religious pantheons. The grimoires are guidebooks of magic that offers instruction, basically, and individual details about each one of these demons, and also their hierarchy within the infernal monarchy, and how they can help you, or how you can work with them. Demonolators work with demons to gain knowledge, to grow, to evolve, as well as strengthen their own magical practices. And some work with infernals simply to create a bond with the divine, because it was something that was either taken from them or something they never received to begin with. And also, sometimes people just want to work with them to heal personal trauma. And regardless of your choice, every demonolator will work with them in their own way, thus making their experience unlike many others. And I do find that most practitioners on this path are solitary, as their personal experience varies so greatly from others, it's very hard to connect and trust other people. And that's sad. It is. Because I myself, and I know through personal friends, that anytime you get a chance to talk to another demonologer, you feel lucky. Because they offer such a unique perspective, and it is incredibly rewarding because this is an incredibly isolating practice. I find that outlets such as TikTok and other social media offer great opportunities for communication between demonolators, but it also can be an incredibly dangerous and judgmental place, as judgment is passed upon anyone who practices differently than another. As remember what I said, we're all moving through this practice trying to heal trauma and evolve. So you do come up against those walls. But I find that if this is a practice you're interested in and leaning into it, it should be done by one who is of sound mind and body. It should be done by someone who has had ample time to deconstruct previous religious dogma and are finally ready to explore themselves in an entirely new way. Discernment should be used in working with spirituality across the board, as everyone here I'm sure knows and agrees.
I apologize.
If you don't, but really. And if someone makes you feel bad, small, or unworthy along this journey, they do not deserve your business and or attention. And this obviously excludes closed practices. But there are very few facts within religion, although one fact remains is that religion will change and evolve alongside the modern sentimentalities of humankind. And if working with demons isn't proof of that, then I'm not really quite sure what is. But I am really thankful that there was more than one person here. Thank you.